You've tuned in to the Bellingham Podcast for the week of June 23rd, 2019. This is episode 122. From that summer city by the Salish Sea, I am AJ Barcay.
And not sticking my toe into the alliteration pool, I am Chris Powell. On this episode, all around this wonderful town, there are lots of people working hard to make this city shine, just like the sun you're seeing up above. You probably pass by these folks in the produce section of the grocery store or are in front of them in line at your favorite coffee shop. People that are making a positive impact on the community, that's what AJ and I keep our eyes out for. We wanted to spotlight one such impact player. So guess what, sports fans? It's interview time. Come listen to the conversation. This, in case you haven't noticed, is the Bellingham Podcast.
All around the world, Hey, I did, Chris.
Do just fine. What song is that?
That was... You don't have that pop culture reference off the top of your head?
No.
That would be Fly by the good old poet Sugar Ray.
Mark McGrath?
Yes.
Are you busting out an early aughts?
I am. I thought you would catch that.
No,
It's summertime.
No, my musical encyclopedia goes from about 1983 to about 1998. After that, I check out and just listen to metal.
Yep, that would be the album Floored back in 1997.
Anyway, I just want to I want to talk about something before we get into our interview. Everyone has been asking me, now that we're fully entrenched in the summer season, they're going, Chris, what are you doing for the summer? Where are you going?
Yeah.
And I look at them and I'm like, why would we go anywhere? This is the reason why we live in Bellingham. This beautiful weather, this wonderful breeze and such. Why would we leave something that is so majestic and pretty?
You know how I answer that?
How do you answer it?
Where are you going? Bellingham.
There you go. All right, fair enough. Anyway, we are here for the summer, y'all, and we're plowing towards episode 200 little by little. I had an opportunity to sit down and have an interview with Meg Weber, an impact player, if you will, in the Whatcom County and Bellingham. Meg is an instructor with the IDEA Institute at Western Washington University. It's not quite your typical classroom type program. You'll hear about that in our conversation. She's also a current board member of the Pickford Cinema, a place that we love.
Hey, Pickford.
Hey, Pickford Limelight, too. And former owner of an internet access company back around the early 2000s, turn of the millennium or so.
An ISP?
Something like that. Okay. But there's a very unique story that she's going to be telling. It was rather engaging to hear. Anyway, also former executive director of TagNW, a community group here involving IT professionals. Yeah. And Meg was also the member of a tech levy committee for the Bellingham School District, that one-to-one project you might have heard about in the news in recent years. She was part of the crew that helped the Bellingham School District implement convertible laptop tablets for students' coursework. Our daughter was recipient of one of those in the school, and so that was a wonderful thing. Obtained her master's in cinema at the University of Iowa and a master's of business administration. That's the MBA for you playing at home at the University of Rochester. So definitely for the past couple decades, Meg has been in leadership and instruction. So with that in mind, why don't we go jump straight into the interview with Meg Weber. Well, Meg Weber, thank you very much for joining us on the Bellingham Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
You have so many things going on in your professional life right now. Let's talk about your work with the IDEA Institute at Western. Now, they have an entrepreneurship minor, which is a little bit different than English 101 and Biology 101. I would love to know, how are you enhancing or disrupting your students in their path as they approach an undergrad degree or a degree at the university?
Oh, I love that term. How are we disrupting? I hadn't thought of that.
It's not just awesome. Sitting in a classroom. Y'all are out there doing very unique things.
Yeah. I think that's a great term, disrupting. Yeah. So I've had the delight of being an instructor in the IDEA Institute for since almost the very beginning. When I came in as what we call a community coach, which are business leaders in our community who come in to support in one-on-one coaching, as well as promoting and pitching the pitch days where students are looking for feedback. So if you're interested in being a community coach, we have openings for that, and it's a super helpful way to connect our students with real life people so they can see their path forward.
We'll put a link to the IDEA Institute in our show notes for that one. So
thank you.
No, absolutely.
Little pitch there. So We have a really strong investment in building and developing the knowledge, skills, and abilities of students so that they can be change makers and leaders in our community. So unlike a lot of entrepreneurship programs that are really focused on commercialization or having you go out and start your own business, we're very focused on helping to build and develop young people into people that can make things happen in the world, really their edification. And so I read this article recently that talked about how entrepreneurship is in many ways one of the new liberal arts and business arts. And we definitely think of it as that. And often I hear so we pull from all areas of the college or of the university and have students from every college because it's an interdisciplinary minor. And so we report to the provost's office, for example. And so we have the opportunity to connect all those students in what we call a Montessori style classroom. So 6 quarters show up to the same room every Monday and Wednesday for 2 years. And then we break off into different sections of about 20 students where we get to work more in depth with them on different concepts. So some of those concepts are leadership development, some of them are developing pretty marketing material, some of them are financials and how to pitch, and just a myriad of concepts there. So really developing both that human side of the affirmation of you can do this, as well as a very high quality standard and expectation of what they're looking to prove, which is there something in the world that's needed? And are you providing the offering that's relevant to that? So product market fit.
And it sounds like you're including a lot, especially in this current age with social justice and diversity and inclusivity. There's a whole lot of that, especially when you're drawing from different colleges in a higher education institution. Yep. So that must play a whole lot in some of your curriculum.
Yeah. Our curriculum is very, very focused on what we actually call a culture of belonging. So diversity and inclusion are sort of the absolute requirements, in our opinion, of what you need to accomplish. And then also within our community, we find it very important to think about belonging. So you could have a very visually diverse community that doesn't fully ignite conversations that are challenging, evocative, and inclusive. So we work on a culture of belonging because a real entrepreneurial spirit requires introverts, extroverts, all different sorts of
So speaking as a introvert who wears it like a badge on his sleeve, there is room for me in the entrepreneurial
There
world.
is room for you. There's a lot of room for you.
Very cool. So for those young professionals who may be currently, making their way in the business world or in their career, and may not be able to gain the knowledge that you are providing in the Idea Institute, what are a couple of areas of wisdom from your perspective? What would you want to share with a young urban professional to help guide their path in a positive way?
Well, Chris, I think you're a great epitome of that. So one of the things I would really encourage people to work on is clarity of the questions that they're asking. So clear questions and an open heart to exploring answers, right? So when you're interested in learning about something, go check it out, research it, connect with relevant people. Bellingham is a great place to nourish networks, and most executives I know, if you invite them out to coffee and say, I want to get to know about your business, they're willing to do it.
I've heard there's a couple coffee shops around Bellingham. In order
Just a few.
Yes.
Or beer.
Yes, should that be your drink of choice? Yes.
So if you're curious about something, I'd say go and check it out and come prepared with good questions and an open heart. And so that's a big thing here, in particular, nourishing networks. And we find it to be a big thing, like not just here, but, all over the place. So to nourish those networks and connect with people. Also discovering, what you can do through that and or through the rest of life to discover that product market fit. So am I satisfying, the needs of the community? Am I asking the right questions? Am I aligned? And so many of us that are, 20 years into my career have had moments where we notice that we don't have the right product market fit, right? We're not offering the solution that's needed. And so how might you have clarity around that and then realign if you need to?
So speaking of those years in the business world for your career, I'd like you to think back to an incident or an event that may have happened while at the time was difficult to persevere through. But in hindsight, as you're looking at the rearview mirror at that event, helped shape who you are right now. Is there something that occurred that was horrible at the time that is actually, I'm stronger and I'm better as a result?
Yeah, that's a great question. So
It's a little in-depth, but yes, I'm putting you on the spot.
I'll go back to when I was sort of learning about how to manage all of that. So with a partner, I had started out a web development and internet access company in the early 2000s. Which
After
was,
the dot-com blow up?
Yeah. So what we were the reason that we started it, we were finding that people, so internet access was available for affluent people in high-end neighborhoods that, had the right phone lines, had the right computers. There are all these disqualifiers. And yet schools in less affluent area didn't even have computers in them, right? So kids had literally no access to the internet, but they had all these curiosities. And libraries are fantastic, and but they sort of needed more in interaction. And so we moved to New York State, and New York State has a really good what's called reciprocal compensation at that point. So phone carriers had to pay each other. And so essentially if you used your computer, yes, it then was dial-up internet technology.
I remember those days.
If you used your computer to dial into a number is what you used to do, therefore dial up, the number that you were dialing into, you would get money back for that. So we said, well, how might we use recycled computers and that money that has to be paid back to us from like Time Warner and other carriers to start a free internet access company or heavily discounted internet access that offers free computers and satisfies the needs of our communities. We were able to do that, which was incredibly fun. So everything was free with very low amounts of money coming in, right? So we had a couple of unfortunate things that happened at that point, one of which was that an employee ended up doing like micro refunds to their bank account in the amount of like 2 cents to $2. And because at that point credit cards, you could do that, right? You could manually refund small amounts. And so we didn't pick up on it. So that was a problem because we lost a lot of income, which then meant like, how do we deal with that? So that was really damaging to, like, at that age, I was like 20, have an employee issue like that, right? And I learned through it a lot about how to create an more open culture that communicated much more frequently and openly, because a number of our other staff members had known that this was happening and they were just worried about how to approach it. So I learned a lot from that, like beyond that initial like super strong wounding.
Oh yeah.
And then the other thing that we learned right around that time, I did not know, in my extreme amount of naivete, that where the majority of web traffic was going at that time.
Yes, indeed. It's not quite Wikipedia.com, is it?
It's not quite. So learned that by having the FBI knock at our door and say, hey, we have this suspicious traffic that we're really worried about. Turned out that suspicious traffic was suspected child. And so to be focused on a free and heavily discounted internet access for families, and then to learn that some of the activity was nefarious, was very worrisome to us. And so we then, and shocking, right? Like I was so naive.
Yep.
And so trying to figure out ways to secure against that, and even just to respond to the FBI, like how do you submit those reports? How do you manage that? And so learning about how to put more and better systems in place all around that, like at age 20, was a really good learning. And so I think, like, even in definitely in my work at the firm and even in teaching entrepreneurship, it's like, how do you create scaffolding and structure that helps you to be sustainable and available? And so how do you notice when those things happened, and how do you respond to those very shocking things?
It sounds like you had quite a trial by fire early in your career.
It's all clear sailing now, 20 years later.
Well, I'm happy that you're able to laugh about that now, at least, or maybe laugh like, oh yeah, that root canal was a bit of a time. But anyway,
yeah, it's true.
So in addition to, let's talk a little bit about. You mentioned we had some discussions offline.
Yeah.
You are involved in a blended family.
Yeah.
In which you have an emerging 7th grader.
Yeah.
I've already gone through this, and so I'm curious. And our listeners have listened to me ad nauseum about technology and devices and stuff like that. Meg, what is your perspective about when is the right time for a phone, when is the right time for a device, and how do you approach that as a parent, as co-executive director of the family unit that you and your husband have?
Oh, I have no idea. It's making me laugh. We were, I was in a training last week that Chris was a significant part of, and I said, Chris, oh my gosh, I have no idea what to do about this phone thing, and how do I get my kid a pager?
Yes, I do recall you mentioning pager. And so we discussed that, but anyway, please continue.
I think they're so tough to consider at what point is the right tipping point, and so individual based on kid. And I'm probably like overly cautious about all of this, and I don't quite know how to reconcile that. I think having observed a lot of kids early on in the internet and their activities, I am a very strong believer in the necessity of internet access for kids, and had a really great time serving on the technology advisory group for the Bellingham Public School District, and I'm a super strong proponent of one-to-one and using technology for learning.
Oh, yes.
And we use it all the time at home for learning, and we ask Alexa all sorts of questions and do a lot of discovery with that. I think for me, one of the challenges is discovering, well, what do you want your child to do independent of home and independent of school? And what does that mobile experience look like for them? And in some ways, I'm sort of haunted by it. I don't know if you've seen that photo shoot where they remove the cell phones.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's a meme.
It's a meme.
Yes,
Okay.
As the kids call it, yes. It's very jarring.
Yeah, super jarring. So if you haven't seen it, what the experience is they've removed phones from, people are gazing at the phones and they remove the phones, and everyone's like frowning and disengaged. And you're looking at all these photos of people, sitting at a coffee shop or at dinner with one another or whatnot, and they're looking at their phones. And so when we used to have the Internet Access and Web Development Company for that first more than 10 years of the 2000s, we were on call all the time. Right. So I'd get phone calls at 2:00 in the morning and whatever. And right around when I had my son, we'd finally hit a point where we'd outsource the call center, outsource some of the technology, and had some scaling. And I just had this like extreme escalation, like where I was like, oh, okay, I get to have a life. And I don't know, I carry with me like the FBI audit and that sense of relief over not having to be on call all the time. And then also just my own experience of how do I set up those boundaries for myself with a mobile device. And it's really hard. And so at some point, I'll get to the point of the kid having a mobile phone. I'm just having a hard time with pulling that trigger because I feel like it's a big trigger.
It's okay. And if Meg's child is listening right now, it will happen. And may just not be on your timeline.
That's right. Well, it's funny too, because teaching at university level for almost 20 years now too. My best students are not on their phones.
Say that one more time, please.
My best students are not on their phones. They show up to class, and if they're on their phone, they're immediately like sending a follow-up message through Teams or through Slack or through a messaging software. So they're still actively a part of the conversation. They're just like the introvert that's a note taker. And so that does happen where the introvert that's a note taker participates in the conversation through a digital device. But my best students are, writing on paper or fully engaged with one another or up and moving, asking questions. They are not on digital devices. And I have not yet seen students, like having had thousands of students now, seen students who are digitally engaged in the classroom that are doing their best work. Unless it's like a digital thing, like let's go and build this website. So I've seen that with my students. I've seen it with other professionals that you just check out when you're in front of a digital device, or you less fully participate. And so all of that like awareness on those areas and not yet having like the skills to figure out how to navigate that, I I don't know. And like our students, they often show up very early to class and they sit next to each other and they chat. And when we don't have that no cell phone rule, we see that sometimes shut down. And like I mentioned earlier, I think like the most important thing for people to think about as they're looking to build their professional lives is like, who do I want to share my life with, and how do I give back additively to them? And I think phones often take away from that. Now, I have a phone. I'm not a Luddite at all, but just like pushing for that continuous involvement with each other is.
This is a tough concept for a lot of parents.
Yeah.
And my wife and I definitely had a lot of discussions about, the peer pressure involved.
Yeah.
With everyone, so-and-so has a phone, and so-and-so's parents let them have a phone.
Yeah.
And everything. And we could see how it's propagated into the realm of higher education, as you've mentioned. And so, good luck.
Yeah.
as you and your husband continue the discussions.
We were laughing about it because we sort of calculated, because my son is so smart, sort of calculated out all the money we had spent at Christmas on workaround devices to phones, right? Because we got this, I can't even remember the name of it, but there was like, there's a device that pulls in with Spotify for mobile listening, and like then we got a new Kindle and got a new it was just like a myriad of things that are all solved by an iPhone.
It sounds like you were about ready to lower your shoulder and go into this world, huh? Yeah. Very cool. Well, let's lighten the topic a little bit. I always ask my interview guests, Meg, in Bellingham, you have a whole lot of stuff going on, and when the time comes when you need to exhale, where in Whatcom County do you enjoy going to recharge, or just get some time to process or contemplate?
Oh, that's so kind of you. I love walking or running at Lake Patton. I find that to be such a beautiful place. Likewise, love the waterfront from Fairhaven to downtown and all around. So I love low barrier entries to how beautiful this place is. I think that's great, and love the hikes too, but they're a big thing to compel people into.
Listeners of our show have realized that I'm not much of a hiker, but I love my wife, and so therefore I'll go on the hikes and stuff like that.
You love that word.
Walking and running is good for the integration, just to be able to process things. So, and also, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of places to get a bite.
Oh, yeah.
Meg Weber, where is your favorite place to get a bite to eat around this area?
Oh, there's so many. Well, my husband loves to cook, and so I love...
Bonus points.
I know. Yeah. We love grilling at home, and have a lot of friends that also love to cook, and so we do tend to eat at home more than I ever thought I would. And then lots of wonderful restaurants in town. I love drinking wine and eating popcorn at the Pickford. I've been on the board of the Pickford. I think wine and popcorn's a meal.
Many would agree with you, yes.
They have some chocolate, too.
For the dessert, yes. That's 3 out of the 4 food groups.
3 out of the 4 food groups.
Very good.
I love grabbing coffee at Woods, and that new place Camber is really interesting and fun. Went to Rock and Rye with a girlfriend the other night. That was a really fantastic experience. And gosh, there are just so many great places here. I tend to be inclined to the places that have great cocktails followed by great food. So.
All right, so where's your favorite place to grab a cocktail then?
Well, Rock and Rye was really great. Then I like that new place. What is that?
It could be.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do a good job.
It's fairly new, I'd imagine. It may not have gotten on our radar yet, but
Yeah. Scotty Brown's does a great job on the Bellinis.
Okay.
If you're up for a sugar rush.
All the Bellini fans out there, take note. Scotty Brown's has your hookup. Meg Weber, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. This was great. Lots of information and continued success with all the work you're doing. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, Chris, that was a very enthusiastic interview. I'm going to have to edit and turn down in bits, but hey, that was great. Thanks, Meg.
I used my outdoor voice on a couple of occasions as well.
I wasn't talking about you.
Oh, okay, fine. Well, Meg has a great spirit, and I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. A lot of laughter, a lot of great information as well. And for the parents out there, take notes. You're not the only one. Should you be in this situation about what device to give your kiddos so that they can enter in the world of online communications? Both Meg and I have, she's about ready to go through it, and I've gone through it. So anyway, thanks once again, Meg, for joining us, and continued success with the Idea Institute at Western Washington University. We should probably stick a fork in this show and wrap it up.
I think so. That wraps it up for this 122nd edition of the Bellingham Podcast. Thank you again so much for listening to us, rating us, reviewing us, wherever you love to get your podcasts. Remember, if you are in the Bellingham area, you might be tuning into us.
Community-powered KMRE 102.3 FM.
And even streaming online at KMRE.org. From the city by the Salish Sea, I am AJ Barce.
And I'm Chris Powell. Thanks once again for joining us on the Bellingham Podcast. We totally got the stick for KMRE. I think we got our rhythm down now.
Yep. Write that down.
Write that down.